Hey guys, listen, you should buy our services. Wait, why didn't that work? Huh? What do you mean I have to explain how our services can help them? What are you talking about? Sales pitch? What's that? I'm just kidding. I know what a sales pitch is. In case you don't, a sales pitch is basically a brief sales presentation you give to prospective customers to explain what you sell and how it can make their lives easier. We'll go over 11 tips for how to make a perfect sales pitch. We'll start with a few general tips, and then we'll talk about what to include at the beginning, middle, and the end of your pitch. Before we go on, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, let's dive into it. As promised, we'll start with 3 general sales pitch tips. The first and most important thing to remember when building a sales pitch is to keep it concise. That means it should be efficient, clear, and to the point. There are different contexts where you could give your sales pitch. You might put it on the homepage of your website, deliver it to someone you meet at a business conference, or explain it at the beginning of a phone call. In any of those cases, you need to be able to deliver your message quickly and clearly, because your audience won't just sit there listening to you ramble on for an hour. Ideally, your sales pitch should last about 1 or 2 minutes. In fact, sales pitches can also be called elevator pitches because they should not exceed the length of an average elevator ride. Another way to upgrade your sales pitch is to treat it as a conversation. Now, obviously, this doesn't always work. If you're just putting it on the homepage of your website, it can't really be a conversation. But if you're giving your sales pitch out loud to a specific person, try not to make it a monologue. Instead, build up to it with a conversation. Find something unique about the person you're talking to, and then tie that into your pitch. Also, give them the opportunity to respond to your pitch as you're delivering it. By personalizing the pitch to your audience, you'll have a better chance of reaching them. The key to sales is listening to your audience. If you're not listening, then you don't truly understand the needs of the people you're pitching to. Our third general sales pitch tip is that you should include both hard facts and emotional appeals. You students of rhetoric out there will know that this is called logos and pathos. On the one hand, you should cite some data, logos, to demonstrate the value of your product or service. But you should also be sure to tie it back to your audience's specific wants and needs, like their fear, pathos, of missing out. Now that we've gone over some general tips, let's look at what to include at each stage of your sales pitch, starting with, well, the beginning. One way you can begin your sales pitch is by asking a question. And I don't mean a completely random question like, what's the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? No, you want the question to be a relevant lead into your elevator pitch. So let's say you sell task management software for businesses. In that case, you might ask a question like, do you ever feel overwhelmed trying to keep up with your to-do list? Like you can get really disorganized? That allows you to connect with your audience's pain points right from the get-go. So you can then easily segue into your value proposition, which we'll get into later. Another way you can start off a business pitch is with a statistic. This one might be a little bit more awkward to work into a conversation with someone you just met, but it's great for sales pitches that you put on, the homepage of your website. For example, if you sell pest control services, you might start by saying locations treated with our pest control services are 90% less likely to be invaded by an army of giant rats. Of course, only use that statistic if it's true. Anyway, a stat like that really grabs people's attention and makes them aware of how valuable your services are. Finally, you could try starting off the pitch with a personal anecdote. This works great in casual conversations. You can relate your story to one of your audience's pain points. So, if you sell data management platforms or DMPs, you can tell a brief story about how much you struggled to keep up with the data at your last job, but how much better things got once you started using a DMP. That can lead you right into the rest of your pitch. Now let's talk about what the middle of your sales pitch should look like. This is the meat of your pitch, so it might be the most important part. After your intro, it's time to briefly explain what your company does. Obviously, this step is pretty important. Imagine giving a whole pitch without actually bothering to mention what you sell. Wouldn't be very effective. Besides mentioning your product or service, be sure to talk about the company itself. Throw in a couple of unique selling propositions or USPs to set yourself apart from the competition. This might include results you've driven or something you do for customers that no one else does. Now that you've established who you are and what you offer, move the conversation back to the potential customer. Explain whom you sell to and what their pain points are. This is a great place to tie back to your intro, where hopefully you brought up your audience's pain points through an anecdote or question. Establishing the problem your audience has sets you up to present a value proposition that addresses their needs, which is the next step. Maybe the most important part of the whole sales pitch is the value proposition. But what is a value proposition? Basically, it's a short statement where you explain how your product or service benefits your customers. The best way to create an effective value proposition is to show how your product or service addresses the problems you mentioned in the last step. Then you can lay out how your company helps your customers succeed and what that success looks like. Finally, let's talk about how you should end your sales pitch. Firstly, you can finish off with an engaging question. This is optional, of course, and it depends on whether you plan on continuing the conversation. If you're giving a literal elevator pitch, you're probably going to part ways as soon as the doors open, so maybe this isn't the best way to go. On the other hand, if your pitch happens in the middle of a larger conversation, a question can keep that conversation going and give the prospective customer a chance to talk more about your product or your service. Finally, make sure you include a call to action. Your pitch won't mean anything if you don't tell your audience what you want them to do with the information you've just given them. If your sales pitch is online, your CTA might involve clicking on a link or signing up for an email list. If it's in the context of a conversation, maybe the CTA would be request for them to call you later about your product or service. Either way, make sure your audience knows which action you want them to take next. Well, that's it for this video. Now you know how to make a sales pitch that will drive conversions for your business. If you want to learn more helpful digital marketing tips, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our email newsletter, Revenue Weekly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.